Welcome to Money on Tap. Money on Tap, your personal finance headquarters, where we bring out the professionals' experience and some fun in what we call three-dimensional investing, utilizing insurance, brokerage, and fee-based planning. That's what we do on this show. We look at all sides of the issues, and we bring a fully independent planning perspective to the table.
Welcome to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. My name is Seth Cressman, joined here today with you, Dan Mickelin and Ben Brayshaw. How are you gentlemen doing today?
I'm doing good. Yeah, same here. Doing really good. Excited for the show. I think this is just really important stuff for everybody listening.
Should we just jump right in with that and title the show the estate planning checklist? Your estate planning checklist is what we're going to be covering today. It's a deep topic, and it's one that definitely gets into a lot of heartstrings for all of us, just because, I mean, you cannot go through the process of planning around end of life and not be emotionally involved and engaged. And there's just a lot of really, really healthy financial stuff that's going to be packed in here. But the topic is just so essential and critical. But we are going to have some fun with this because, you know what? We've had some successes and we've had some failures out there that are really interesting, folks.
I think one thing that we've done to specifically address internally the complexity as well as the importance of estate planning and helping our clients facilitate getting that done. I mean, I can't tell you how many people walk through the door, right, Dan? We sit down with people, right, Seth, and they've never done a will, they've never done a trust, they don't have any power of attorney or healthcare directives, they have no idea where their kids are going. I mean, there's all these different concerns and fears that they've never ever addressed, and they're like, well, I don't know who to go see, and I don't know. Well, we have a relationship with an attorney that's in staff, in office, that can help facilitate all of those things. And we help watch getting these things done. It's a laborsome thing. No one wants to go through this process. It's like talking about death. It's like buying life insurance. It's not an exciting thing to do, but, it's a necessary thing to do and something that people just don't cross that bridge. And I think we've tried to make it as simplistic as possible for, our clients and we'll work with their attorneys, but a lot of people don't have an attorney to resolve their estate planning documents.
Yeah, I mean, I think kind of one of the aspects of the show is we're going to point out some kind of high-profile celebrity mistakes in this process. And we spoke last week about Lisa Marie Presley and kind of the issues that are going on with her estate presently. But using these examples to highlight what can really go wrong if you don't follow the checklist and you don't keep things up to date. And, again, it's a cautionary tale of where you do not want to end up. That's for sure.
Well, without further ado, folks, we got a lot to cover. We're going to start off with some money in the news.
Coming to us from the New York Post, written by Ariel Zilber. Car buyers face sticker shock as new vehicle prices skyrocket 30%, which is something that, coming on the heels of the pandemic, we saw kind of ripple through the used car marketplace into the new cars. And for a time being, this was all kind of chalked up to supply chain and semiconductor issues. And I think, we've kind of been there and worked our way through that end of it. But now what's taken effect here is that, a lot of the car manufacturers have decided to really downsize what they keep in terms of available inventory. And that is, even though sales overall are down, driving up the price at the lot in a very significant way. They say here, since 2019, the average price of a new car in the U.S. has risen 30% to $50,000. And it'll cost $777 a month to lease a car, double what it was in 2019, which is absolutely astounding. They say that according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average monthly intake for salary is $4,318. So in order to buy a new car, you'd be dedicating 18% of your take-home earnings to fund that new car, which is just a really out-of-whack number.
I think the thing that's interesting is you think with all these inflated prices, these companies are making more money. But the article clearly points out that even though Ford, who reports a increase in their revenue, they were up over $7 billion year over year, but their profit was down.
Yeah, something's going on here in the overall supply process in terms of them securing the parts they need to build and manufacture these cars and get them on the lot and sell it. It's driving up the prices for us, but to your point, Ben, it's reducing the profitability for the manufacturer. So it seems like there's something really breaking down in the process here.
Interesting number there for GM as well. The profit of $14.5 billion last year was record high, but then Ford had the $10.4 billion, which was less than the forecast sum of 11.5. I'm curious about the differences in the manufacturers and the numbers, as well as what is the opportunity, right? Because there's going to be a squeeze here. How are they going to figure out either a different kind of a financing for the consumer? Because 18% of take home is ridiculous to be putting into a car, especially if you're considering people are also possibly buying houses and food and everything else on top of that. That's just unbelievable. I wonder what it's like as far as not just necessarily the manufacturer, but the dealerships right now. Are they experiencing more profitability because of the demand is still high and they're able to kind of support numbers and maybe higher profit margins than they were? Because I know that was an industry that really suffered, especially as far as, sales and salespeople, what they were taking home, just because the margin was getting squeezed because of the internet and really, frankly, the amount of information that was available on what the price of the cars are out there. So limiting that supply, again, driving prices higher and possibly creating a better job situation for those dealerships. Yeah,
my understanding is that the used car market is still massively inflated. It's down from its kind of peak, but as new cars become significantly more expensive because of chip manufacturers and trying to get these things to the lot, it's even transporting the materials, like you got to transport all the materials to the location to put it all together, right? And then you got to transport it to a dealership to actually sell it. I mean, the transportation costs are astronomically high. So there's all of these different things, I think. But across the board, I think you're right, Seth. I mean, I think the dealerships are still in a major profit margin on used car sales. I think that's still in their favor. I think the new car sales are their least profitable. Probably a new option for a lot of people. Maybe you don't have to pay for the house and the car. You just buy a van and live there. Down by the river.
I learned that you can lease a used car. I've never seen that before. I've just never had that offer on the table, I guess. But interesting to see that people are leasing used cars.
Yeah, no. They say that the average cost of a new car is used car rather is up to $27,000, and that lease rate, Seth, that you pointed out, and that was something I as well had never really experienced. It was $544 a month, which is more than I'm used to paying for a new car. I mean, it's it's incredible that this is where prices are at. And I got a lease turn in coming up here at the end of the year, so I'm getting increasingly nervous about that as I sit here reading this.
You'll be wanting to buy it out.
Yeah, well, I probably will.
I think there's some room for some Chinese cars in the works here, and maybe the Yugo is going to come back.
Yeah, I thought this was interesting, is that as an industry, they sold 13.9 million cars last year, which was the lowest mark since 2011. And they expect an increase of about 1 million for 2023, but that'll still be well short of 17 million, which they sold annually prior to the pandemic. So there's still a gap there. It's still down comparatively from looking back all the way to 2011.
Well, I mean, if the price is up 30%, I mean, and your inflation in life is only 6.5%, there's a disparity there. I'm not really sure how to quantify.
Yeah.
Next up, we have 7 stocks generated an astounding 25% of the S&P's profit by Matt Krantz. This is an article out of investors.com. Now, this is not really a surprise to any of us as we're looking at it, but I think the article does a great job of just bringing to light how vertical, certain areas of the market were in profits last year versus, where the losses were. I mean, to think about what the S&P has done, and then to think that, and a lot of people think S&P 500, there's 505 stocks in the S&P 500. So they're talking about 7 stocks generating that year-to-date price S&P increase of 25%, and it's like, it's crazy. I mean, it's Apple, Microsoft, Exxon, Alphabet, or Google, J.P. Morgan, Chevron, Bank of America. I don't think any of us are surprised by those names.
No, and it seems like it's a while that this has been a pattern. We were talking kind of before we started recording the show. Seth, you brought up the FANGs. Like, we've been through these cycles where it's just a small group of companies that are really just disproportionately outweighted in the S&P, and it's in every facet. It's in all the pricing, it's in the profitability. It's really incredible. As an example here, ExxonMobil accounted for 3.7% of all of the profit in the S&P 500, even though it only accounts for 1.4% of the S&P market value. So it's 3 times itself represented in profitability versus the overall weighted bears on the S&P 500. That's a significant kind of outweighted portion of what's going on there.
Yeah, I think we're always in interesting times, right? Part of what we're seeing, and we probably don't. It's kind of hard to pull through some of the numbers that we're looking at, but the consolidation that we're seeing around the world, especially globally in tech, we're going to start to see some of these numbers work out through the economy, and some changes that are coming down the road in technology. We'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the next article, I think, but it's fascinating. These numbers are still down, but they're still, as far as what they were a year ago, the percentage of profit, that kind of stuff. But just the dominance that they have in the marketplace is astounding.
Well, I think we've talked about how passive and active investing, constantly has a cyclical play, right? There's a time where you just let the market ride and do it, but then there's a time when you have to get strategic, and you got to make real investing decisions, which is what we did last year. And I think we saw that profit, for a lot of our clients in our straight up equity traded portfolio that we manage, and there's pretty phenomenal returns there. And I, being north of zero was a great story to be able to tell. And I did some review with a client the other day, and it was relieving to them. Like the relief of that. And I think, there's a point in time where passive investing will beat active investing, and there's a time when active investing, will beat that passive kind of just sit and let it ride. The problem is that, active investing, if you're doing that, you usually manage above the downturns, which are the things that people want to avoid the most, right? Like I think active investing, like if passive is just going to kind of win over a period of time, when you look at the active, it's just like it's constantly this seesaw back and forth argument of which one's better. And I truly believe that, high yield, high dividend, blue chip, profitable companies, trading them in and out of favor, I really do think that is a wave of a future kind of investing strategy that's going to do good by a lot of people. And I think it provides a source of income. It provides, a source of, security, because you're confident of some of the big name companies, and they're making money and so forth. And I was laughing with a guy the other day. We were just joking. It's like, people are like, oh, all the people that lost money in Enron, right? A supposedly profitable company that was paying yield, meeting all those kind of criteria. But the problem is that what happened with Enron would only be a small portion of a portfolio that we would ever invest in, right? Because of the rigidity that we have. So it's like we wouldn't just buy these 7 stocks; it's 25 to 30 stocks.
Yeah, that's kind of, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket model there, right? There's only so far as a percentage basis of a portfolio you ever want to get invested in any company, regardless of how well you think it's going to perform. There is just that inherent risk of something that you missed or you're unaware of, and what kind of dramatic impact that can have in somebody's ability to retire and ability to save. But still, it's it is kind of amazing when you look at this. It's just kind of adding up the percentage of profit for the year. Those 7 companies accounted for 26.4% of the profit of the S&P 500. So it took the other 503 companies to make up the 74% of additional profit. So it's amazing how that works out. And and you look at it, some of these companies kind of overlap with that whole FANGs experience. Apple and Google in particular. So you just look at those and you say they've had the ability to kind of profit throughout a couple of significantly different market cycles. That's something to think about.
And people get scared of taking profits. They're like, what else am I going to miss? It's like, you just have to keep taking profits. Like, you don't have to sell it all. Just keep taking a little bit of profit here and there, Yeah. I literally, we were talking the other day about something, and you said something, and I was like, if a market took a downturn today, 20%, what do you want to have in your portfolio? When you look at your portfolio after saying that to yourself, you'll know exactly what to cut. You're like, I won't be sad to miss this one. I won't be sad to miss this one. I'll take a profit here.
Yeah, don't be afraid of taking that profit and never fall in love with the stocks either. Understand that they're there to serve a purpose, and once that purpose is met, move on and find another opportunity.
It's really hard in the active world where we're talking about such a limited amount of stocks not to become emotionally invested, right? It used to be the fan mag. Now it's, taking a look at these, 7 stocks. They've changed and rotated. And that's the discipline that people have to be able to have inside of an actively managed strategy, is to be able to move, like you said, take profit. You can't be tied into GM because, grandma and grandpa had it. It's going to run its course. It has its internal issues, and it goes through what it goes through, or the market goes through what it goes through. If you want to be passive, then be passive. Go indexed and, do the blind kind of investing that way. And, over time, that's been a strategy that people use, and it's done really well. We're talking about a very different time right now, and moving on to the next, which is 13 states that do not tax your income in retirement. And this was a really cool article to be able to come across, because we talk so much about income in retirement. Thank you, Brian Baker from Yahoo Finance. And guess what? Top of the list right there for you folks was New Hampshire.
Yeah, there's a handful of states that don't have income tax in general, but in particular, there's 13 reference here that they go out of their way to not tax your retirement income. Now, New Hampshire kind of fits the mold. They're a little bit different, because they do tax dividend interest income, at least right now, which would have an effect on your overall retirement income if you're sourcing some of your retirement dollars from accounts that produce those things. But there is kind of a way around that, is if you hold those dividend-producing assets inside of an IRA or 401k or any of those qualified retirement accounts, and you take your distributions from there, so you reinvest the dividends but ultimately take your monthly or annual income out of those accounts, it kind of gets reclassified as income, and therefore you'd be able to meet the exemption and not be taxed on your retirement income, here in New Hampshire. Now, some of the other 13 states referenced are Alaska, Florida, Nevada, South Dakota, Tennessee, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming. And each of those does it a little bit differently. So it's important to really get a clear understanding in terms of where you plan to retire. If that's where you live now, you're probably familiar with this tax code, but it's always a great question to ask and things to be educated around. But particularly if you're looking at relocating in retirement, either to get to better weather or get closer to the kids, whatever the scenario might be, before you go ahead and make that decision to take the leap, understand the lay of the land in terms of state taxes for what those retirement income dollars, may be looking like in the new setting. So be aware.
You've heard it here first at Money on Tap. That's going to do it for Money in the News. We are going to be talking about your estate planning checklist, get into some of the details and some stories here around estate planning for you. It's a great show we put together. Can't wait to get into it with you. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. You're listening to Money on Tap.
For a number of our listeners, they have a lot of questions, and you might be one of them. Today, we're just offering what we call Zoominars, webinars over Zoom meeting rooms, where we have top experts, Social Security, estate planning, and financial planning experts for you to speak with, do a private consultation that way today. We're also having webinar-based Zoominars where we're going to have multiple groups where you can be part of that and enjoy that as well. Give us a call at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com to schedule your Zoominar.
We appreciate you listening to Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan. You can contact us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more of this week's program.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We are talking about your estate planning checklist. It's a topic that's just near and dear to us. It's one that we talk about regularly with each and every one of our clients. It's just a part of what we breathe at Brayshaw Financial Group because it is so important to you. And we're going to get into some of the reasons why, some examples that, hey, first of all, if you haven't done this stuff, no shame, right? There's people out there that you would think would have or should have, or whatever, all of this stuff in order. And it's just so common to just be busy with life. It's the thing in front of you that you're paying attention to that you got to take care of. And unless you schedule the time or it's just kind of your DNA of how you operate, this stuff just gets overlooked all the time. So we're here for you to help you to get that stuff in order. And for starters, I just want to say what a privilege it is for us to do this work with you at Brayshaw Financial Group and Money on Tap, because we get to see the results. We get to see what happens for you when that weight is lifted, when you know you've done this work and you've done some simple things to get pieces in order so that you don't ever have to worry about what happens if. So with that, I also want to say, if you are joining us via radio, hey, we're glad you're here. You can also take a look at us at any one of the podcasting outlets out there. Find us on your iTunes or your iHeartRadio or Spotify or whatever you listen to a podcast out there. We appreciate the likes, the listens, and the downloads. All that stuff helps us out here at Money on Tap. And thank you for the Facebook and Instagram and Twitter likes and follows. And also you can follow each one of us at LinkedIn too. All that is public service information. And we're going to get into it now with some mistakes that have been happening out there in the estate planning world.
And a couple of these mistakes are, seemingly easy to fall into, but really it's stuff that you just have to go out of your way to avoid. And a couple of real examples to kind of look at. And first one up is Prince, who died in 2016. He died without a will, which is...
It's just hard to believe that like any person would die without a will, especially like Prince.
I mean, amassed an estate worth $200 million, right? So you'd think he'd had an advisor in there somewhere.
Advisor? How many attorneys did he have? He probably had 20.
Yeah, so somehow this got missed, which is really the kind of simplest first step you can possibly take. But with the $200 million estate, he had 6 siblings and half siblings, and the issue there was, though, in terms of getting it paid out, even through the probate process at the state, was that he had some federal inmate who claimed to be his son, right? So someone just popped up out of nowhere claiming some attachment to this estate, and therefore it took years for any of this stuff to kind of grind through the process. And, with his siblings, I mean, who knows what their financial state was or how urgent their needs were. But, if you have children or truly dependents, there's years worth of delays in probate because, some unexpected party raised their hand and said they're entitled to a piece can really be a hardship on people.
Oh, that's like putting a wedge in something you couldn't even imagine. I mean, this is called, when dying without a will is called intestate. And that is like, I would say that is the sin of all sins of a life of somebody who's got a lot of wealth. I mean, because you're bound to just absolutely. I mean, the guy claimed he was his son. Like, what do you do? Like, they have to figure out if that's true,
right? I mean, for all the time and money he had on his hands, a couple hours sitting down with an attorney would have saved these people, years, literal years of waiting for what was truly, justifiably theirs.
Yeah.
And another example is failing to remove beneficiaries from your estate. And this is something that we do run into a lot. An example, this is Barry White, who died in 2003. At the point at which he died, he was separated but not yet divorced from his second wife. And even though he'd been living with his new girlfriend for several years, the new girlfriend and his 9 children received nothing because he had not updated his beneficiaries to remove his ex-wife or, soon-to-be ex-wife as in the midst of this divorce. And one thing to note here is that, the divorce isn't final until it's actually been signed by a judge.
I was a little confused on the 9 children. Were those 9 children his?
I guess so. I mean, that's the way it reads here.
Well, then that was a while in the making then. And, wow.
Yeah. Yeah, unless he had multiples, you would think that took a little while there. But I was
going to say, like, opposite of that, right? We have, failing to add. So this is failing to remove beneficiaries. You have, and retirement plans are the most complicated ones. I mean, it makes a point in this one document you pulled up. It's just like, if you don't you can't remove a spouse from a 401k, for instance, without them signing off on that. So you have to go through a divorce decree, and you've got to do the documents. It's, there's a lot to that. And, but then there's like failing to add the beneficiaries. I mean, Heath Ledger was the next example we have. And we were talking about this before the show, and I just thought that was interesting that, he had left his estate to his parents and his 3 sisters. And Seth made the point, shows a lot about that family, because Heath Ledger wrote the will before he had a daughter who was 2 years old when he died. And the family and the sisters, forewent their inheritance and gave it to the daughter.
Which is incredibly rare, you think, for people to step up, even family, and do what you would think is the kind of simple enough right thing. When money's in hand and the judge essentially hands it to you, it is not likely to come back.
And I'm sure it wasn't a small check that these people were handed over.
I'm sure he was worth millions at that point.
Well, if you think that you have a will, maybe you forgot where to put it or forgot where to tell somebody about it. Jackie Joyner, when she died in 1998, age 38, everybody thought she had a will, but nobody could seem to find it. And so there was a whole bunch of stuff in there. There was her mother, who could continue to live rent free in the couple's condominium for the rest of her life, and a bunch of other stuff that apparently she had conversations around, but nobody could find it. And if it doesn't exist, then it doesn't exist.
Well, and that's one example. And then you've got, you think about all these, there's so many mishaps, right? There's an estate mishap. We got 5 pages here. We could probably go through all of them. And we talked about Lisa Marie Presley, last week and so forth. But there's mishaps that play into the favor. And I think this is the funniest one, because I am not a Yankees fan. Matter of fact, I call myself a Yankees enemy, unfortunately. But that's just good old sports competitiveness. But George Steinbrenner, right? He died July 13th, 2010, which was literally the perfect year for the guy to die, because there was no estate tax. It's like these people go through all sorts of different craziness. We got people, dying, and it's horrible taxes, this, that, and the other thing. Well, Steinbrenner dies, and in 2010, the estate tax had a void year where there was no federal estate tax, and he avoided a 55% tax on his estate. They estimate that his tax bill would have been $600 million, and in 2009, if he died the year before, it would have been $500 million. So, there was no federal estate tax on George Steinbrenner passing the Yankees. That is just, to think that happened, that is just so unfair.
Couldn't happen to a worse guy, right? Yeah.
So, to think about all the different things that have happened, a lot of our listeners, I guarantee you, most of our listeners probably don't have a will, have an outdated will, or have a will that says something that they don't believe or want anymore. That's the vast majority of everyone who has a will. And I'm actually, listeners, hey, listen, I'm at fault for this. I have a will, I have a trust, I have, healthcare directives and power of attorneys, but I'll tell you that, my 21-year-old daughter still has a guardian named. There's things I should update about my will, and make sure that stuff is taken care of and so forth. So this is just a good push for me to get that done and get that updated. So you're not alone, and I think that's the reason this stuff is not – people usually have this mentality too, if you've done a will, like, well, I did that. It probably needs to be updated because, like me, you have adult children. You might have children that were born after your will, just kind of like Heath Ledger and different people. Like, there's always things happening in your life that change. You might have other assets that you didn't have when you wrote your will, personal collectibles or things like that. People get older and they collect artwork. I had somebody who had a very expensive piece of artwork, and I was like, well, who are you going to leave that to? Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. Because if you don't, you have to sell it. someone in your estate has to sell it and divvy it up accordingly. So that was something they wanted to be an heirloom. I said, well, have you said that? So there's a lot of different things that happen, but you're not alone. And this is something where if you have questions, we have an in-house attorney that can work with you. We'll work with your attorneys. Give us a call. We're happy to let you, have a conversation with Mike Henry and the attorney that we have for general counsel here and so forth. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Seth. He's going to take us off on the estate planning checklist.
Folks, you are listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We do appreciate all of the Facebook likes and the Instagram, Twitter follows on LinkedIn. We are talking about your estate planning checklist, and we're going to start moving through some of these things pretty quickly. But before we do, just want to say, hey, we're glad you're here. If you haven't done this stuff yet, that's great. I mean, it's a very common problem that a lot of people just have not sat down, taken the time to do these things. We're here for you. Give us a call. We work in this all the time, and we have zero judgment when it comes to working with people and helping them in their financial planning, wherever you're at. Let's get together, put a plan together, and start working towards these things. It really doesn't take but, a few hours of your time to, meet with the professionals and start working through some of these things. And with that, one of the first things we want to ask you to do when we get together and we start doing some of these estate planning, and you can do this on your own right now, grab a pen, grab a paper, start working through an inventory.
Yeah, make sure the things that you're including here is, homes and real estate, land, anything like that, vehicles, cars, motorcycles, boats, collectibles, whether it's
baseball cards,
art, antiques of any kind, anything of value there. Of course, then there's the kind of the monetary assets, right? Checking and savings accounts, CDs, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, retirement plans, and of course, life insurance.
Yeah, that's a big one. Probably the second biggest thing that, after you get your inventory together, the important thing is you got to create the will, right? You got to write down like, hey, who's everything going to? What's the procedure here? What am I trying to accomplish? I think the biggest thing that we have from a strategy perspective, or we help people or, coach people into really, getting a solid will together is, if you passed away today, what would you want to have happen? And if you did it in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years, or if your spouse had passed away first, or, we go through those kind of conversational pieces, and that's something you can do yourself. Is it, okay, well, what happens if I die today? What would I want to see happen to all of our assets? Or if my spouse and I, were killed in a car accident, God forbid, like, what would that look like? How, who would take care of our kids? And go through that same conversation today, 5 years from now, 10 years, 20 years from now. Get yourself out some sort of time horizon and ask those questions and write down what that is. And then to accompany your will, traditionally you're looking at having a trust, right? And this would be more of a, general trust, what we would call a revocable trust. Now, none of us on this podcast are attorneys, but the conversation around a revocable trust is really, the focus is to avoid probate. Kind of like when we talked about Prince earlier, he didn't have a will and he died intestate, so everything's going to go through, probate. And you will do that if you just had a will too, like if you didn't have a trust, but you should be looking at something, in the range of like a pour over will that says, hey, if anything's not in my trust that I wanted to avoid probate, it was a mistake and it should have been in the trust. And usually the states will honor that thing. It actually happened to my parents passing. That was kind of interesting. They were able to apply to the state and say, hey, listen, we meant to pour all this stuff over into this trust. So that's a real thing that can happen, and something that you should consider. Now, there's also irrevocable trusts, and there's reasons for that, and we can talk more about that in a minute, but I think that's probably the first number 2 step that you have to really make sure that you're putting in line is your will and then potentially your trust.
Yeah. One of the things I would say as far as the trust, a lot of people get a little intense about that stuff, it's a little intimidating. And the simple thing around this is it's babysitting instructions. What you're doing is you're actually kind of creating this other person. A trust is regarded as another entity, another person. And within that entity, it has instructions. And that's it. So when you pass away or you're incapacitated, then what happens? And you just give some directions for what you want to see happen. And that's how you get out of that probate, where everybody has probate is where, everybody has an opportunity to lay claim to an estate. And that can get really, really expensive if you don't have some of these things set up already.
Yeah. And you have to, in probate, you have to list every asset that you had. People know how much you're worth, and people don't really care about your house. Like, if your house is probably in the trust or not, everyone knows. They can go to Zillow, they can figure out how much your house is worth. But when you start listing out your retirement plans and your brokerage accounts and your checking and your saving, and, it can get real personal real quick. And guess what? And when they know who's going to get the money, those people get a lot of phone calls. Hey, can I borrow this? I'm, been hard up on my luck. Would you mind lending me some money? And those are problematic things for families.
Yeah, it all becomes a matter of the public record. So, certainly if you want some discretion in passing and deciding, where things go, trust is absolutely the way to go there.
Yeah. I think the other thing that happens inside the trust world, and we've done this repetitively, a lot of people, comes to, the concern of healthcare and, what happens to me. And we've used irrevocable trusts, which are trusts that you can create that you can't change. So once you've put an irrevocable trust in place and you've done things, it can't be undone. So it's not something you haphazardly fall into, and most attorneys will steer you clear of those. But we've used that to protect people who we just did one the other day where a client wanted to buy some long-term care coverage where one spouse was uninsurable, and they decided, well, I want to make sure my wife is cared for no matter what. And so we purchased a long-term care life insurance policy inside an irrevocable life insurance trust so that they were able to protect that investment of the insurance, both the life insurance and the long-term care that was attached to it, so that it wouldn't fall into, unfortunate hands if he needed care and wiped them, became impoverished. So he wanted to make sure that there was a legitimate care available for her long term. So there's ways to use these trusts that are incredibly clever and can create all sorts of avenues of security and kind of reduce and remove some of those fears.
Next up, we have powers of attorney. So inside of the powers of attorney, what are these lovely terms that we're using? There's durable power of attorney. There's limited power of attorney, general power of attorney. For the most part, these are authorizations within capacities across different legal entities. And there's the durable power of attorney, which really has that medical power of attorney for healthcare agreements and authorities for somebody to make medical decisions on your behalf. And this is the one that gets probably talked about and looked at the most because we've had so many scenarios where people have not had these in place, and then people don't understand how to act on people's behalf if they're incapacitated, or what their decisions are around their health care, or just in fact the ability to act on their behalf for their health care, even if it's for different medications and hospitalizations and all these kind of factors. The general power of attorney is like an agent that's an agreement to serve all needs as your state allows, and they can do things like sign checks and sell property and act actually in a larger capacity over many, many, many other avenues. And this is one where you really want to make sure that that's somebody that you do have a tremendous amount of trust in to be able to act on your behalf. And then the limited power of attorney is attorney is not eternity. It's limited, and that's somebody that can act on your behalf to manage your retirement accounts, or you designate somebody for a period of time or for a very small portion of what it is that you need done.
Yeah, these people play an important role, and you got to understand that you're literally, if you were to be incapacitated, leaving your finances and medical decisions and every other aspect of your life potentially in these people's hands. So having both, a real strong trust in them and making sure there's a clear understanding of what your wishes are, that they will follow through on those things is a really important piece to that. So be careful in terms of who you nominate there. And next up is beneficiary designations, and we've talked about, kind of pitfalls of having them be not freshly updated in the Barry White scenario, or just not having them at all with Heath Ledger. particularly watch out for these things if you've had multiple marriages, and make sure that you review these things and that they're up to date with your present intentions, not your past intentions.
Yeah, I would even take that. I mean, I think those are all fantastic points, but to take that even a step further, I mean, we literally go through, and when we do reviews, we list, what the primary beneficiaries are and the contingent beneficiaries, because, you might leave something to your wife, but, if you don't name your children through your IRA, they lose the ability to potentially stretch that IRA out, or, there's all sorts of different complexities associated with those things that could cause undue tax harm, all sorts of pieces. So, make sure that when you do your reviews or in any of your retirement assets, that and it's not just your retirement assets, but all your assets, that you name contingent beneficiaries to all of those. Now, that creates another piece to it, right? So if you're younger and you're having children and you're continuing to have more children, you obviously want to update those contingent beneficiaries. And, when we do reviews with clients, we have that list in front of them. It's printed out. It's given to them every time we sit down with them. So, that's reminded very clearly, hey, you don't have a contingent beneficiary. There's nothing listed here. The one thing we can't manage is if you have a 401k with work. We're not visible to that, but that's something that we would have a conversation about. And usually we list that down. So if you have a child change or an additional child in your house and a child change, we're not trading them in, but, from the standpoint of, if you have an additional child and you're updating it with us, I would automatically probably say, well, did you do this with your 401k too? Don't forget.
And there is a point there, Ben. I know we kind of moved past that. Maybe it was said in jest, but, sometimes people subtract children from the beneficiaries, based upon spendthrift issues, and this we've heard a lot of reasons.
I understand why that happened to you, Dan.
Yes,
I understand.
It does happen. I'm out. I'm officially out. But
I've talked to your parents. They put me in, though.
So that stuff unfortunately does happen in life, but these are the kind of things, again, just a reminder to, stay aware, keep your documents updated. And whatever your intentions are in the moment, if there's a change there, make sure all the right parties know about it.
Seth's parents told me to call him Mom, too, and Dad. So I might be in that one, too. I don't know.
Beneficiary funnel over here. It's it's good to have friends like Ben.
Oh, gosh.
One other factor for those beneficiaries is that in those accounts, like your life insurance and your IRAs, 401ks, those beneficiary designations do bypass probate. And that's kind of an important factor to understand around those assets. If you do not list anybody there, then guess what? They go right back into that estate and part of that process. Folks, you're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. And we do appreciate all of the likes on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, and anybody out there in the podcast world listening to us today. We do appreciate you being there and listening to us, and the downloads and the likes and the listens. All that stuff makes a difference to us here, and we appreciate you for being here with us today. We're going to take a break, and we'll be right back.
Folks, it is so much fun for us to bring you Money on Tap. My name's Seth Cressman, and I am one of the hosts here at Money on Tap. I'm also a financial planner. That's what we do. That's what Ben and I do. And the fun part is we get to have this radio show. We talk about important things that we think you need to listen to and be aware of to help raise the bar as far as your financial literacy. It's a big part of what we're trying to do here. The other thing that we're doing here as well, as financial planners, we are welcoming you to come and call us and to join us at Brayshaw Financial Group. Experience what complete wealth management looks like. Let's take a look at all sides of the issue, get a three-dimensional perspective, and put a plan around your next step. It's so critical, and so many people just leave this part out, and then they find out later, oh, if I only would have known. Hey, don't let that be your story. Give us a call at 855-226-8551. or info@yourmoneyontap.com. If you have $250,000 of investable assets today, our plan is free to you. We think it's important for you to know the facts and have a playbook so you can have a successful retirement. Give us a call at 855-226-8551. Thanks for listening.
You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or email us at info@yourmoneyontap.com. And now, more Money on Tap with Ben, Seth, and Dan.
Welcome back. You're listening to Money on Tap. You can reach us at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We are talking about estate planning checklists. We have been through the inventory, the wills, the trusts, the powers of attorney, beneficiary designations, and here we are, some fun with letter of intent. What in the world is this? Well, for one, it's really not a legal document, but what it does is it really helps to build context and some continuity into what you want. Like, really, what are your desires? And this is where, some people have, pets or, things that are really special to them that they want to be specific about and maybe say a little something about handing this part of, the assets or their estate over. These are things like artwork. It is, some of the investments as well. It can really include everything under the sun in your estate. But a lot of the time people will include charities and, where's the location of a deed for the real estate, funeral instructions. I think, Ben, you told me that you want nothing but purple flowers, right? Isn't that in your letter of intent for your funeral?
That sounds good, I think. Well, the letter of intent's an interesting space. There usually is nothing legally recognized. Judges will read it and they'll see if it's within the realm. But in reality, I have one client who's written letters to a number of their heirs and has, given them to us to give to them individually as, when they pass, and they want, they're leaving the money to them, but they want certain things done for their kids and different things like that, and how to use the money, and they want it done responsibly. And I can appreciate all that. I haven't read any of them, but that's what they told me that is. It holds no legal bearing, and she's done beneficiary work in different pieces. But letter of intent can be helpful for a trustee. It can also be, provide some sort of evidence or proof to the family that they're moving within the intent of, what mom or dad or whatever, because sometimes there's like, hey, mom would never have wanted that, or dad said he never wanted that. And it's like, well, actually they left me this letter and you can see it's in their handwriting or whatever, provided by the attorney or the financial planner. And this is what they were trying to get at with their will and trust. And I'm trying to fulfill that.
Yeah. All of the formal legal documents are going to be written by attorneys and legalese, right? You wouldn't even want to bother trying to read through them and decipher what it actually means with the Latin terminology and the rest. But the letter of intent gives you an opportunity to kind of speak in your own voice, from beyond, and let everyone understand in a way that is clearly coming from you, like you said, in your own writing, perhaps, or just in the way you would hope to language it and to leave these instructions behind, so that there's really no doubt amongst the people who stand to benefit from, your work and assets, as to how you prefer to see things done.
Yeah. I think the last piece I would just add to that, and it goes right into, healthcare power of attorney, because letter of intent and what you want and all of that stuff, that can all be written like, hey, I really do want the plug pulled when the time's right. But if it, seems like, there's a potential life expectancy of some quality, do whatever's reasonable. You can say that stuff in letter of intents, but you can also explain why, Johnny, who's special needs, got more than Tommy, who's, a big shot, attorney in, DC or something. You can say, hey, listen, we feel like we need to do more, but our love for you is equal. It's as a parent, you have to make tough decisions, and we feel like Johnny needed a helping hand in a way that you were, beyond what you were blessed with, so.
After that, we kind of come into the conversation around guardianship, right? And this is what Ben was referring to earlier, having his daughter over 21 years of age. And in full capacity, she really doesn't need a guardian. But if you have children that are, like both the rest of ours, which are under the age of 18, and if something were to happen to us, designating who would be able to step in and take care of them and manage finances and these kinds of things. This is one of the big roles that a guardian can play. And there's some other roles as well.
If you don't name all of your children for guardianship, you're going to have a court involvement. It probably will work out to be the same person or whatever. But, if you asked your brother to watch your one child and then you decide to have 5 more, and now there's 6 kids, your brother might say, I'm not prepared to take 6 kids. So updating that is really important. The 8th item we have here is, for you to note your state and federal estate tax laws and how they work. This might determine, one, where you live when you want to die. It might figure out what kind of trust work you might do. You might want to understand what the federal estate tax exclusion laws, which do exclude 90% of America. But there's a lot of conversation about the resetting of those and those coming down. And, when you fall into the federal estate tax bracket, everything above that's taxed north of 50%. So none of these things have been made permanent. George Bush used to say, make the estate tax laws permanent over and over and over again. That's never happened. That they have continued to rise, and that has kind of nixed the idea for most Americans of credit sheltered trusts or marital deduction trusts that we used to advise on pretty regularly. I still advise on that because I do think there's going to be a resetting, and when people don't have those trusts in place and it resets, you're going to be kind of caught off guard.
There'll be a lot of busy attorneys when that happens.
Yeah, exactly. You want to take the next one?
Yeah, and then up next is professional help, right? There are a million websites, and you see the commercials where it's LegalZoom.com or whatever the case is, where it's, they'll mail you or let you get online and do kind of a do-it-yourself estate kit. And that might not be a bad thought to kind of help you get your thoughts in a row and kind of understand what the process will look like. But when it comes time to formalizing, the actual documents that will kind of live beyond you, just seek professional help. I mean, that's my 2 cents worth right there. It's like, get a real attorney to step in and do that, so you can actually have this conversation with them about what your intentions are, and they can understand that and translate it into legal terms that will actually hold up in court at some point.
I would take that a step further. I mean, as financial planners, if you don't have somebody in that space fulfilling this kind of like median void and trying to take your assets and talk to the attorney and try to like facilitate the communication, like as financial planners, we understand what attorneys can accomplish. We understand clients better. I find that as a median in this space, we accomplish a lot more. I mean, we had a client in here working with an attorney. We spent 3 hours rewriting documents when we started raising, hey, you didn't talk to him about this concern or that concern or this concern. And that was an offshoot. And I think when you use like our attorney and, you kind of work with us and we can facilitate this stuff. So you potentially don't have an error inside what your financial goals, your personal goals, and your estate goals are.
Yeah, when you're doing it yourself, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And you don't know what you didn't think about. Right. So the benefit that we can offer you, at least as non-attorneys, is the simple fact that we've had this conversation 1,000 times. When you're doing it for yourself, you're going to do it one time and one time only. So we can probably help point out some things that you may have missed or didn't fully consider, just because of the simple fact that we've been through so many of these conversations, that we can at least direct you to consider this potential outcome, or what about this asset, and then you have that conversation with the attorneys from going there forward, so that they can formalize the documentation. But just the experience of having done this a number of times will probably be a benefit to anybody we sit down with.
And lastly, you should be reviewing, reassessing your wills, your trusts, your legal documents every 3 to 5 years.
Or if you have a major life change along the way.
Exactly, Dan. And I think if you wrote your wills or trust more than 5 years ago, you should probably be on the phone with someone like us, and say, listen, I would like you to look at this, see if this is current. I mean, healthcare directive laws, power of attorney laws, all these laws are constantly changing. And you want to make sure these things are up to date. You want to make sure that you're not a Terry Schiavo case. That's probably the best example of a major problem.
And the simpler things, we've had the situation a lot where, one family member is interested in a particular asset, whether it's a piece of real estate or a business. And so for the other children, the offset was to buy life insurance. Yeah. Okay, so everyone presumably comes out equal in this, even though not everybody wants the same things, at least from a dollar value perspective. But you know what? The value of these assets changes, and your life insurance didn't adjust. So there might need to be a reconsideration there.
Folks, you've been listening to Money on Tap, your estate planning checklist. If you have questions, concerns, or just haven't spent the time to go through this process and would like to start, give us a call at 855-226-8551 or info@yourmoneyontap.com. We appreciate the time that you've spent with us here today, and we look forward to sitting down with you here in the near future and going through your estate planning checklist. Thanks for joining us here today. Be successful in your investing, folks. Thanks for listening to Money on Tap.
The views expressed are not necessarily the opinion of this radio station and should not be construed directly or indirectly as an offer to buy or sell any securities mentioned herein. Investing is subject to risks, including loss of principal invested. No strategy, product, material, or tool mentioned can assure a profit nor protect against loss. Please note that individual situations can vary. Therefore, the information, products, materials, or tools mentioned should be relied upon when coordinated with individual professional advice. Past performance is not a guarantee of future results. This show may be subsidized in whole or in part by a product sponsor or issuer. Securities and advisory services offered through SagePoint Financial Incorporated, member FINRA SIPC, and a registered investment advisor. All other services offered through Brayshaw Financial Group LLC are independent of SagePoint Financial. SagePoint Financial and Brayshaw Financial Group do not provide tax or legal advice. Main office is located at 116 South River Road, Bedford, New Hampshire, 03110, and can be reached at toll-free 855-226-8551.